Miss Bhutto, who had shed the mink coat she wore leaving London, appeared in simple and modest clothes. It was perhaps ironic that this woman's audience was 99.9% male. The most recent military ruler, and the best known internationally, is General Zia. He came to power in a coup 9 years ago and imposed martial law.
Since 1977, the people of Pakistan have been suffering. They want a government of their own, and if there's democracy, they have a right to a government of their own.
But isn't there a danger that General Zia might be afraid of this kind of emotion and that martial law might be the result?
I'm sure that he must be nervous. I could even go so far as to say that if this continues for any longer, he'll be quaking in his jackboots.
Ms. Bhutto, are you worried that your return to Pakistan might precipitate the reimposition of martial law there?
I hope not. My party is doing its best to ensure that we can create the climate for a peaceful transfer of power to full democracy. I hope the civilian administration will respond accordingly and will not take any precipitate step which could take the country back to repression.
But do you not feel, having just emerged from the trauma of martial law, what your country needs most now is a cooling off period from active politics?
Well, Trevor, the problem is that the country has been through a trauma, and many people are wondering whether the present civilian structure is just another phase of martial law and whether the trauma is really over. My party would like to see the present civilian structure play a historic role by taking the step towards full democracy in the country, so that people in our country have a sense of participation, they have a sense of representation. All Pakistanis love their country, and without the sense of participation, without representation, I'm fearful that the initiative could go out of moderate hands, and Pakistan being a federal country, the consequences could be very dangerous because it would just incite greater ethnic dissatisfaction.
But what I'm talking about is the timing of your return. Do you not think that maybe you'd been better to allow things to lie quietly for a little longer, to allow the flower of democracy, if you like, to spring up a little more before you went back and shook the system all up again?
But Trevor, I don't want to shake up any systems. The point is simply, if you want to have democracy, democracy means choice of the people. My father won the elections in March 1977 fair and square. The people wanted the Pakistan People's Party. They saw it as their hope for progress and deliverance from poverty. But our government was illegally overthrown. Then in October 1977, the people were again denied a victory at the polls because General Zia called off the elections he had promised. Since 1977, the people of Pakistan have been suffering. They want a government of their own, and if there's democracy, they have a right to a government of their own. I hope wherever there is freedom and wherever there is democracy, people will support us in our struggle.
But now the president has had elections and he's promised that he'll have further elections. What's your strategy? Are you going to try to make him have these elections before the term is due?
Well, I think the less said about the previous elections, the better. They were held on a non-party basis. They were held under the umbrella of martial law. Even the use of loudspeakers was not permitted in those elections. All the political opponents were locked up in the prisons. They were not elections. The assembly which came about was not representative. Now, what we are saying is that we had these doubts, we had these reservations, but despite these doubts, despite these reservations, we are prepared, my party is prepared to play a constructive role. And if this civilian structure would also like to play a constructive role in the history of our country, then they should rise up to the occasion and give a date for immediate elections so that power can be transferred. They said that 60% of the people in the country took part in elections. My party said not more than 20%. If indeed 60% took part, what is the problem if I am going back to my country?
Do you have a personal problem, though? If you maintain too high a profile, you could be put in jail again or under house arrest. If you, however, keep a low profile, you won't be able to rally your opposition forces as you need to. So it's a very difficult period for you, isn't it?
My only problem is that I have lent my voice to those who are weak and dispossessed in the country. I have lent my voice to democracy and federalism, to equality and justice. And because I have done this, I have been punished and persecuted. My party has been punished and persecuted. But I think it's my duty to my country and my people to continue to lend my voice to democracy and federalism, to equality and to justice. I think the present civilian authority knows that it's good for the country if power is transferred, and the sooner they take steps to see that it is fully transferred, the better it will be.
Do you really think that you can go back to Pakistan, campaign, and not be put under some restrictions again?
Well, I'm going to go back to Pakistan. If people wish to come and see me, they will come and see me, and then it is up to the regime. The regime must decide whether they want a political solution, whether they want to meet the Pakistan People's Party politically, or whether they want to take the country back to repression. The onus is on them. But if I was in their place, I think I would wonder whether when the time came, it was more honorable for me to go out through the front door or to put up a messy fight which could have bad consequences both personally and politically.
Ms. Bhutto, thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor.
Benazir, thank you very much. I'm sorry we kept you so long.
Trevor, I'm sorry I couldn't see you before going, but I hope
Yes.
you'll come to Pakistan soon to cover our elections.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Well, listen, you must look out for my colleague out there, Jane Corbyn.
I'll certainly do that. Thanks a lot.
And give her any assistance. If I'm sure that she'd be most grateful to see you. Thank you so much.
Okay then, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The emotion of her supporters created a momentum neither they nor the police had expected. The orderly plans gave way to a push and shove on the concourse as her supporters swept her through a stunned array of holidaymakers escaping Britain's alleged spring weather. Benazir Bhutto herself, though composed, can also hardly have expected this kind of emotion, but she is in no doubt that the same thing, greatly magnified, awaits her in Pakistan.
This is a drop in the bucket compared to what we expect at home. This is just a small reflection of what you will find back home in a few hours' time.
The last time she returned home, she was placed under immediate house arrest. If nothing else, demonstrations of support like this will show General Zia he cannot move against her again with impunity. John Suchet, ITN, at Gatwick Airport.
The sight that met Benazir Bhutto's eyes this morning. Thousands upon thousands of people in the streets of Lahore come to welcome her home from political exile and proclaim her head of the Pakistan People's Party, the party determined to challenge President Zia and install Ms. Bhutto as the country's leader. The long journey from London was the last Ms. Bhutto intends to make. She's come to Pakistan to stay. Throughout the night on the plane, she and her aides worked on speeches outlining her policies. She must have something concrete to offer, not just the charisma of the Bhutto name. The name is enough for the party faithful, many of them returning with her from exile, uncertain of their future. But Ms. Bhutto now has to prove herself to a wider and more critical audience, the people of Pakistan. But how far will President Zia allow her to go in rousing her supporters?
If the regime keeps a low profile, I'm not expecting any law and order situation at all.
Do you expect that the regime will keep a low profile in regard to you?
Well, it's a tricky situation and a delicate situation. The regime has said that it's interested in restoring democracy, and my party has said that if your intentions are democratic, then fine, we'll test the democratic voters, and if people want elections which are fair and impartial, on party basis, then we hope you'll hold them. So let's see how the regime reacts.
The plane began its descent to Pakistani soil as dawn was breaking. Ahead lay her greatest political challenge so far.
I thought as the time came near, I'd start feeling adrenaline flowing through my veins. But at the moment, I just feel very peaceful.
The airport was almost deserted. The security forces had cordoned it off 24 hours earlier. So as Miss Bhutto stepped out, there were no excited crowds to greet her, just a few party officials.
Nice to see you after such a long time.
She was hurried into the terminal. An eerie silence hung over the airport. Her only audience so far were members of President Zia's security forces. But they couldn't keep the crowds at bay for long. Outside the airport gates, as the motorcade advanced, the crowds were finally able to get to the woman they'd been waiting for. Miss Bhutto, who had shed the mink coat she wore leaving London, appeared in simple and modest clothes. It was perhaps ironic that this woman's audience was 99.9% male. Pakistan under General Zia has turned towards traditional Islamic values. But today, unveiled women did venture onto the rooftops and even into the procession. Miss Bhutto's trump card is her name. Her father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was executed by General Zia. But there are many in Pakistan who have reservations about the Bhutto years. They say he was a feudal landowner turned autocratic ruler who forgot his ideals of equality and became an elitist, intolerant of opposition. His daughter inherits a party split between her father's old cronies and younger politicians with different ideas. Now some party factions accuse her of autocratic behavior whilst in exile and of appointing untested men, her men, to key positions. Without political experience, she will have difficulty uniting the party and convincing the people that her politicians can form an effective government. In the meantime, Benazir Bhutto has seized on the current anti-American mood here. Today, her supporters burned the Stars and Stripes. President Zia is heavily backed by the US, which bolsters his anti-Soviet stand over Afghanistan. And many Pakistanis are sharply critical of current US policy. Benazir Bhutto's supporters count today's rally an enormous success, but some observers here put it in a wider perspective.
She has demonstrated her strength to the regime. She has been able to mobilize a large number of people on a very important occasion of her return to Pakistan. But at the same time, this massive show of support for Benazir was not turned into a violent anti-regime protest, which is what the regime wanted all along.
So in fact the crowd weren't demonstrating against President Zia?
It was a combination of support for Benazir and also a demonstration against Zia-ul-Haq, definitely, but it was not enough mobilization to topple the Zia regime, as some people in the People's Party have been thinking and expecting.
I don't really think General Zia has many choices. A time comes when a person can tell that it's time to go, and I think that time has come for Zia. It's time for him to go. He can either go gracefully or he can go ungracefully. It's up to him. But I think that basically as he watches the tour of the Pakistan People's Party in the country, he has two choices. Either to order fresh elections on party basis, which are fair and impartial, and therefore seek a solution through the system he has brought into being. Or the other is to order my arrest and the arrest of hundreds of other activists, bring in a new era of repression, and thereby demonstrate that the democracy he brought in was not really democracy, but just a civilian facade for martial law. I'm not sure that in the second alternative, the army would stick by him.
General Zia is playing a waiting game, hoping that Benazir Bhutto will burn herself out. But the people here obviously have different ideas. The problem is if they express those ideas too forcefully, then General Zia may indeed reimpose martial law. Jane Corbin, ITN, with Benazir Bhutto in Lahore.
years of its 38-year history, Pakistan has been run by the army. The most recent military ruler, and the best known internationally, is General Zia. He came to power in a coup 9 years ago and imposed martial law. Last year, he returned Pakistan to a form of democracy. He remains president. Zia chose as his prime minister Muhammad Khan Junejo, an experienced but little-known local politician. President Zia maintains that Prime Minister Junejo, as chief executive, is really in charge, but many people here say that it's Zia who continues to rule Pakistan. Prime Minister Junejo gave his first Western television interview to Channel 4 News.
Welcome to Pakistan.
Thank you very much indeed.
He maintains the army no longer controls the country.
Yes, frankly, there's nothing day-to-day affairs with the president. President, he's the president of the country. He's head of the government, where the prime minister is the chief executive. He has to run the country. So we have good cordial relations otherwise, but running the country, it's the prime minister who has to run it.
Despite the claim that the Prime Minister is responsible for running the country, Zia remains not only president but chief of army staff, a post he's said he'll relinquish but so far hasn't. Some observers believe he's afraid of another coup and wants to hold on to power by remaining head of the army.
Now this is vast power. This is the major and most important office. And Junejo, despite at times feeble complaints, has not been able to persuade Zia to shift over or to make room for some other general. Because although technically Junejo, as the head of the government, should be determining who the chief of army staff ought to be, but Junejo has not been able to do it.
Muhammad Khan Junejo is perhaps the least known major politician in Asia today. He comes from a wealthy landowning family and went to agricultural college in Britain before beginning what's been a low-key political career. His critics say he's failed to make a real impact, but Junejo can claim he enabled martial law to be lifted after 8 years and returned the country to democracy.
I think the most important decision which we have taken, besides martial law, is the restoration of full fundamental rights to the people. That's a very important decision. Now, when we have taken the decision, let us give a chance to democracy to be established and a fair chance to my government.
Leading the opposition outside Parliament, Benazir Bhutto is determined that this government should not be given time to prove itself. She's demanding fresh elections. Ms. Bhutto's rhetoric has been directed almost solely against President Zia. But in reality, in the new, more democratic Pakistan, the man she'll have to face at the polls, whenever they're held, is the Prime Minister. He says that she's free to take part in the next elections in 4 years' time.
She's always welcome. She should. I don't see why she should not be integrated. She's always welcome. Only when the elections are announced, she should come, contest in the elections, ask her party men to elect, to contest. If they get the mandate from the people, they're welcome.
The Prime Minister says Ms. Bhutto's party boycotted last year's polls, so why should he give in to their demands for midterm elections now?
If they feel that the midterm election must be held, that is their individual demand. But normally, if they were sincere to restore the democracy in Pakistan, then who stopped them? They should have gone into the elections. They should have fought the elections. Nobody stopped them. They boycotted it.
The government are anxious to build up the Prime Minister's image to counter Ms. Bhutto's show of popular support. Junejo's pronouncements, not Zia's, are given prominence in the media. But nonetheless, many people believe that President Zia and Ms. Bhutto are the only political heavyweights in the current contest.
Now Junejo is really in between two stools. He neither has the popular constituency, which I presume Benazir has. She's given the most, she's demonstrated it. And he doesn't have a constituency in the army as such, because Zia presides over the army. So here's a man who's neither here nor there really, in effect.
Izzat Ma Wazir-e-Azam Pakistan, Janabe Muhammad Khan Junejo.
Muhammad Khan Junejo tried to preempt Miss Bhutto's triumphant homecoming by holding a public rally in Lahore 3 days earlier, but he chose a smaller meeting place. The crowds listened, but there was little emotional response. Much larger, more enthusiastic crowds have attended Miss Bhutto's rallies. His critics say Mr. Junejo, an appointed Prime Minister, is not a popular figure.
So he's inconspicuous. He is not opinionated, and he doesn't have a constituency, and he's no crowd puller. He's just no crowd puller. He's no public speaker. In the politics of the subcontinent for the past 100 years, public speaking and crowd pulling has been very important.
But whatever his speaking abilities, the Prime Minister has the power to implement policies which will help the people of Pakistan. Miss Bhutto has been mainly concerned with attacking President Zia. Meanwhile, Mr. Junejo is starting to put into effect ideas which her party says they suggested years ago. Mr. Junejo has ambitious plans for Pakistan.
His main aim in the next 4 years is to double the number of Pakistanis who can read and write, from 1/4 of the population to more than half. 70% of the people of this country live in the villages, and Mr. Junejo wants to drain their land and irrigate their fields. Agriculture is vital to the economy, but productivity could be higher with more up-to-date machinery. Investment in the rural sector is now a top priority. But people throughout Pakistan, in the villages and in the cities, are speculating whether the Prime Minister will have the time or the opportunity to bring his plans to fruition. It will depend ultimately on the army. They're used to running this country, and if they feel the government isn't making progress and the opposition are becoming too unruly, they may well decide a civilian government is not as good for Pakistan as a military regime. The Prime Minister, however, is convinced the army is committed to democracy.
They all felt that this is not the way. We have ruled the country for 8 years now, but this is not the way that we should rule it. We must restore the democracy in the country. And that is one of the reasons that they have agreed with us. They have lifted the marshal, they have gone back to the barracks. You don't find anywhere any army officer being associated with any civil system anywhere in the country. They are not there.
But whenever the Prime Minister returns to his residence, there's a poignant reminder of the power of the army. For this was the house occupied by Mr. Bhutto, the last democratically elected Prime Minister. Mr. Bhutto was executed by General Zia, who has now chosen Muhammad Khan Junejo to head the first civilian government in 9 years. But has the army gone back to barracks for good, or is it just a strategic withdrawal? The answer will determine the future of Mr. Junejo and Pakistan. Jane Corbin, ITN, Islamabad. In Muslim Pakistan, a woman is traditionally the property of a man. She represents his worldly wealth and status. The richer a man, the more wives he can have. A woman's only duty is to work in the household of the man to whom she belongs. First her father, then her husband, then her son. When Pakistani women appear in public, they are always modestly dressed, with a shawl over their heads. But increasingly, the orthodox Muslim view is gaining ground, that a woman should be completely covered and veiled. As Pakistan has moved towards becoming a truly Islamic state, the role of women in society has become more and more restricted. Under General Zia's 8-year martial law regime, religious leaders began increasingly to dominate the political scene. Mullahs like Dr. Isra Ahmed are determined that Pakistani women should be segregated from men at all times.
So this is actually to restrict, the sexual excitation. Islam wants that this sexual excitation should be restricted between the husband and the wife. And rest of all unnecessary excitations. They should be removed.
These Islamic pronouncements clash with the Western views of many educated middle-class Pakistani women.
It is only in very recent years that the legal status of women has started suffering a deterioration. It's the cultural and the social attitudes towards women which have not changed for a long time and which need to be changed.
When Pakistan was founded, equal rights for women were enshrined in the constitution. Women were accepted in many professions. But during the martial law years, their status changed. Groups like the Women's Action Forum were started to fight for equal rights. But why are women in Pakistan more repressed today than they were 10 years ago?
Since independence, for the first time, we do have a middle class which has suddenly emerged, a middle class rooted in feudal society and feudal culture, which of course is always in Pakistan as elsewhere extremely oppressive towards women. And that middle class has economic power. It's now making a bid for political power and is using Islam as a convenient framework for a very conservative ideology.
The middle classes may now dominate politics in Pakistan, but little has changed in the villages for hundreds of years. Here, women do not stay indoors or hide their faces. They are vital to the economic life of the village. Women are in charge of the animals, the prime source of a rural family's wealth. Traditionally, many skilled domestic tasks are shared. The woman spins and the man weaves. Religion is less central to village life. The mullah doesn't have the influence here that he has in the city. But though these village women are free of many of the restraints put upon their urban sisters, all women in Pakistan are now affected by far-reaching changes in the law. The Supreme Court in Lahore. During martial law, General Zia introduced the Sharia, the Islamic Penal Code. Laws were enacted which mean that 2 women are needed to give evidence which will equal the evidence of 1 man. Rape cannot be proved unless 4 male Muslims of good repute witnessed the offence. These laws, according to women lawyers, are a direct result of the influence of the mullahs in Pakistan.
The government wanted an all-out support from these people, and that is why they took this stand over from the religious groups who have always, since the inception of Pakistan, gone against any legislation in favor of women in the personal status laws or in the laws of citizenship.
Women have no protection any longer, and the criminals have all the protection because they can do what they like and they can get away with it.
Women are second-class citizens in other areas too. Education, for example. 26% of Pakistani men are literate, but only 16% of women can read and write. Even if girls do go to school and then get a job, the mullahs want them segregated in the workplace too.
A woman can work, she can go to work. We can have separate industrial units for women. Women will be supervising and women will be working. Only what is needed is that there should be no free intermixing of sexes.
Benazir Bhutto's return has given women hope. If she were to successfully challenge President Zia and his government, she'd be the first female head of an Islamic state. But Ms. Bhutto, realizing perhaps that male voters could be alienated, is cautious about supporting the women's movement specifically.
The main and important part is that there should be no discrimination on any grounds, and in a People's Party government there will be no discrimination against women or against minorities or against ethnic groups.
But even if the present regime remains unchallenged, many women here believe that things will get worse for them. Although the government has been influenced by religious leaders, some mullahs say that the authorities haven't gone far enough.
It has given encouragement to the pro-Western women in our society. And they have encouraged them in coming shoulder to shoulder with men in all walks of life. So actually this regime, during its 9 years, long years, it has done more harm to Islam and Islamic civilization than any good.
The Prime Minister insists that his government is prepared to extend the Islamization of Pakistan.
So the people mentally, they would like that there should be a real Islamic system in the country. Realizing this, and whatever the steps have so far been taken in the past, there's still a lot is to be done here. And I have told my members, I said, gentlemen, the real survival of the country is to give a real Islamic state. And for that, all the relevant laws which we have to make, we must make them.
Women who have already experienced the restrictions of the Islamic Code are pessimistic about their future under President Zia and Prime Minister Junejo. They feel that sooner or later, even those women in the remotest villages of Pakistan will be forced to bow to the will of the mullahs. Jane Corbin, ITN, Lahore. They had waited for hours in the blazing sun, 250,000 people, the biggest crowd Rawalpindi had ever seen. It's been the same in every town Benazir Bhutto has visited, jubilant, happy crowds. The procession that escorted Miss Bhutto into Rawalpindi was in a carnival mood. This city, adjacent to the capital, is the headquarters of the army. The homes of General Zia and his Prime Minister are here. But still, the people turned out in force to greet her. "We are your army," they chanted. Her supporters released doves, symbols of happiness and prosperity. Miss Bhutto seems relaxed, despite her grueling schedule. It frequently takes her procession 12 hours to reach a meeting place. She's made some of her speeches at dawn, after standing all night as her truck moves at a snail's pace through villages and towns packed with people. How does she feel about the response?
It's been stupendous. In my wildest imagination, I could never imagine this. It's just been growing from momentum to momentum. People have joined us barefooted, walked 40 miles without food, water, stayed up all night till 7 in the morning to hear me speak. I think they just want change so much. If there's democracy in the country, it would be very hard for General Zia to ignore this outpouring of sentiment. And you can see there's a very large extra parliamentary force. I would like to see such sentiments channelized through democratic institutions.
The rallies are well organized by Miss Bhutto's party. Their own marshals keep the crowd in order. The security forces have stayed away from her meetings. The numbers and the emotions are undeniable. But the question is, how can these people's referendums, as Miss Bhutto calls them, be translated into real political power?
Time is running out for Benazir Bhutto. In a month, the religious festival of Ramadan begins, and all political activity must cease. She must hope to achieve something concrete by then.
Many observers of the political scene here, men like Ayaz Amir, leader writer for the paper Dawn, feel that to make a real impact, Miss Bhutto must change her strategy.
What begins to hurt an administration is when public protest in this form takes place simultaneously in many towns. And suppose a party calls for some action, like a strike or a work stoppage, and it happens, let's say it brings 3 or 4 cities to a halt, that is when it begins to hurt.
The government is showing signs of nervousness. Miss Bhutto's procession was rerouted to avoid both General Zia's house and the jail where her father, the former Prime Minister, was executed by Zia's martial law regime. Government ministers admit that Miss Bhutto has a mass following, but insist they still have the majority of the people's support.
Having 6 or 10 or 12 public meetings with large attendance from all over the country does not necessarily mean that Ms. Bhutto has the backing of the majority of the people. We have been elected by way of an election in which over 53% of the people of the electorate have voted for us. Now, what better proof do you want of the support of the electorate for this present government? We were the people who ended martial law, and it was not Ms. Benazir Bhutto, and it was not the opposition leaders who did it.
This is not a mood which is being whipped up by the People's Party of Benazir. It exists. It's only she has come and she has become the catalyst of all this thing.
But isn't there a danger that General Zia might be afraid of this kind of emotion and that martial law might be the result?
I'm sure that he must be nervous. I could even go so far as to say that if this continues for any longer, he'll be quaking in his jackboots.
Ms. Bhutto presents President Zia and his government with an intractable problem. Having emphasized that her freedom to speak is a sign of Pakistan's newfound democracy, it's difficult to ignore her demand that the wishes of the masses should prevail and the government should hold an election. The size of the crowd suggests that Ms. Bhutto would then win a sizable number of seats, if not the majority. While there is the possibility of some accommodation between her and members of the civilian government, she has made it clear there can never be room for General Zia, the man who executed her father. Jane Corbin, ITN, Rawalpindi.
Lunchtime prayers in the small Punjab town of Rabwa. To the world, these men seem to be preparing to pray as countless Muslims have for centuries. But in Islamic Pakistan, the particular beliefs of the Ahmadiyya movement have been branded unacceptable. They're regarded as heretics, masquerading as Muslims. The problems stem from this man, Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, who founded the Ahmadiyya movement towards the end of the last century. His claim to bring new prophecy offends mainstream Muslims who hold that the Messiah promised by Muhammad is yet to come. The 10 million followers of the movement worldwide believe they've brought a renaissance to Islam, making it what they describe as pristine and pure. But in Pakistan, a country created for Islamic beliefs, defending the ideological borders of the faith has assumed great importance. The 4 million Ahmadis who live here are seen as infidels. According to retired justice and former head of the Islamic Ideology Council, they must be cast from the Islamic fold.
It is something extremely painful, I should say. It should not only for me, but for any reasonable person, to call a person who claims to be a Muslim and asserts to be a Muslim and to hold him a non-believer as someone outside the pale of Islam. It is something most painful and regrettable. And I have come to the definite and firm conclusion that they were outside the pale of Islam, and there is absolutely no doubt about it.
In the town of Rabwa, virtually all of whose residents are Ahmadis, there was great concern 2 years ago to learn that the martial law regime of President Zia-ul-Haq was to legislate to prohibit them from what the government called anti-Islamic activities. No longer were the townspeople of Rabwa and fellow believers elsewhere able to call themselves Muslim. They couldn't summon the faithful to prayer in the Muslim fashion or name their places of worship mosques. Ahmadis allege that some of their buildings have been defaced, inscriptions from the Quran obliterated with paint. 26 Ahmadis were arrested last month for wearing badges proclaiming their belief in the central tenet of Islam. In suburban South London, the present spiritual leader of the movement has found a heavily guarded place of exile. He fled Pakistan 2 years ago because of what he regards as the religious persecution of his followers.
Hundreds of Ahmadis have been punished, persecuted, prosecuted, dragged in the streets by the police, beaten up, just for the crime that they declared this kalima, that's fundamental article of Muslim faith, because they believed there is no God but one. They believed in the truth of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And this is a crime, prime crime in Pakistan, a crime for which they will not accept bail.
I'm very sorry if there have been some individual cases of some persecution. It would be something which is wholly indefensible, and one would, any reasonable person would, instead of, say, condoning it, would rather condemn it, I being one of them. I wouldn't mind telling you that some of my very near relations, they belong to the Ahmadiyya sect. And I have every reason to believe that no case of persecution has been brought to my notice of this kind.
The Munir family believes one of its members has been persecuted for his religious beliefs. They discuss with their lawyer the death sentence passed on 32-year-old Ilyas Munir for the killing of 2 men when his place of worship was attacked. He maintains from behind bars that he's wrongly convicted, especially since the mosque caretaker has admitted firing in self-defense.
We were really very much upset that why this sentence has been given to such a man who has not been on the spot even, because we were thinking that there will be justice will be done.
Amnesty International has drawn attention to the 4 Ahmadis now facing hanging in Pakistan, especially in view of doubts about the legal procedures of the Munir case.
Well, apart from our unconditional opposition to the death sentences, there is serious concern that there may be a possible miscarriage of justice because of the serious allegations that have been made about the partiality of the investigating authorities. It is simply the contention of Amnesty International that, in the first place, before this military court, we do not believe that the procedures employed have ensured that these prisoners have had a fair trial.
In Rabwa, the Ahmadiyyas have a college for missionaries, with over 300 students from all over the world. Taught in Urdu and Arabic, these young men have dedicated their lives to spreading their beliefs. And it's this concern with converting other Muslims to the movement that may have contributed to the hostility of mainstream Muslims. Students like Tahir Selby from Wembley remain convinced of the rightness of their beliefs.
We like to think of what God thinks rather than what man thinks. And in our opinion, this is what God wants, how Islam should be practiced.
The Ahmadiyyas are a successful community, prominent in commerce, education and public service. Local merchants displayed a photograph of their founder with pride. The community insists on rigid purdah for its womenfolk, but maintains high standards of education, able to claim more than 3 times the average rate of literacy for Pakistan. Such achievements have done little to endear them to mainstream Muslims. Some maintain that the problems of the Ahmadiyyas are basically political, that President Zia-ul-Haq's government has sought popularity through religious orthodoxy.
General Zia-ul-Haq's regime has no raison d'être, no reason for being here, absolutely no justification. So they have to seek reason for their existence. Why? So they took upon themselves to champion the cause of Islam. And because they could not champion the cause of Islam in any positive manner, because it's very difficult to champion the cause of any religion in positive values, so they took the downhill course of following the negative values of persecution in the name of religion.
Attacks on the Ahmadiyya community in Pakistan can be seen as a way of unifying all Muslims behind the authorities. In difficult political times, and with increased sectarianism among the followers of Islam, the Ahmadiyya community provides a convenient target for attack. As the Muslim faithful gather to pray, members of the Ahmadiyya movement know they cannot expect this or any future government to change their legal position here as non-Muslims. All Pakistani politicians must come to terms with the influence of the mullahs if they want to achieve power. The Ahmadiyyas can only pray that their Muslim brothers will show a degree of compassion, that they will no longer face arrest and imprisonment for their religious beliefs. Graham Walker, ITN, in Pakistan.